11:01, so let's go ahead and get started with our Friday Lunch and Learn. Today we're going to be talking about intermediate Excel. My name is Julie Dort. I'm your facilitator for this morning. I did put my email address down here, so if you have any questions at a later date, feel free to email me. If you just need a little reminder or help with Excel, I'm happy to attempt to help you out via email. Like I said earlier, I do have the Q&A open and the chat open on another screen over here. I'll keep my eye on that. So at any time, if you want me to go back over something or you have a question, feel free to post that. Here's our agenda for today. First of all, we're going to look at cell references. Then I want to look a little bit at the cosmetics of creating an Excel worksheet. We're going to do a little bit of charting. We're going to create a lookup table. We're going to do some sorting and filtering. I'm going to show you how to take information from one column and move it into two, what's known as text to columns. And then we're just going to give you a little brief introduction to pivot tables. Okay. So here is my first example for this morning. We're going to talk about absolute reference and relative reference. So what I have here is just a catering business, and this is one order. So we're going to have to create a subtotal to begin with, and this is just a very simple multiplication formula. So I'm going to start with my equal sign, and I'm going to multiply the unit price times the quantity. And when I hit my enter key, it gives me that subtotal. Now, as you know, I can use my fill handle and just pull that down, or I can double click and it will fill it down for me, and it fills in those formulas, and that's known as a relative reference. So it's relative to the cell. So you can see when I filled that down, it went from row 4 to row 5 to row 6 to row 7, and that's known as a relative reference. The next thing that we want to do is we want to create the sales tax or calculate the sales tax. So again, I'm just going to put in the equal sign, and we're going to multiply our subtotal, which in this case is in D4, times our sales tax, which is in F2. And when I hit the enter key, it gives me the sales tax of $4.47. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to fill that down again. But you can see that I came up with some issues. I've got some errors going on here. So let's go ahead and look at our formulas and see what's going on. Why would it work just fine for my subtotal, but not for my sales tax? So when we filled down, you can see that it went from D4 to D5 to D6 to D7, which is what we want. However, in our multiplication, it went from F2 to F3 to F4 to F5. And that's why it's giving us some error statements. Because when you use that fill handle with a relative reference, Excel knows to move down a row or over a column. However, in this case, we need to create an absolute reference for F2. So let's go ahead and just delete this information, and let's look at this formula again. I'm going to go ahead and double click on that so we can see the formula. So to create an absolute reference, or to tell Excel not to move off of this cell, what I need to do is lock in that row. And we're going to do that. You do that by putting in dollar signs. So I can manually put in a dollar sign. And the dollar sign before the F is locking in the column, which we really technically don't need to do. But I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. What we need to do is we need to lock in row 3. So we need to tell it, or row 2, excuse me. We need to tell it not to move down, to stay on line 2. We're not concerned with the column because we're doing a fill down and not across. So I can manually put those dollar signs in, or if you're on a PC, if you hit the F4 key, you can see I'm just hitting my F4 key. And by the F4 key, I mean the very top row, you've got function keys. You have F1, F2, F3, all the way over to F12. And if I hit the F4 key, it will turn on the absolute reference for both the column and the row. If I hit my F4 key again, it will just lock in the row. If I hit it one more time, it just locks in the column. And if I hit it again, it turns it completely off. So let's go ahead and just lock in row 2. And I'm going to go ahead and hit my enter key. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill down again, and you can see that I get the appropriate sales tax. So let's go ahead and look at those formulas. So you can see that it moved down to row 4, row 5, row 6, and row 7. However, it stayed on F2. So with that absolute reference that we created, it stayed on F2. It focused on F2. Okay, so that is, excuse me, your relative reference for your subtotal, an absolute reference for your sales tax. Now I'm going to do a line total. So I'm just going to type in the equal sign again. We're going to do a simple addition. So D4 plus E4 and enter. And again, this time we have a relative reference because we want the line total to total each one of our sales for soft shell taco, hard shell taco, enchiladas, and rice and beans. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to double click, and you can see that it moves all of that down. It gives us our grand total. Go ahead and show you those formulas one more time. So again, in subtotal and line total, we were using a relative reference. And for our sales tax, we created an absolute reference. So that's just a little about cell referencing. I'm going to move over to my next worksheet here. And the first thing I have is charts. But before we move on to charts, I do want to show you a couple of other things. I'm going to go ahead and just increase this, zoom this in a little bit so it's a little bit easier for you to see. You notice when I did that, that I have some pound signs in here. No worries. Those pound signs are just telling me that there's not enough column, there's not enough space in this cell for it to show the number. So I'm just going to come up here. I'm going to double click. It will expand that cell or increase the column width automatically for me. And we can continue on. So before we chart, what I need to do is I want to create just one more absolute reference because sometimes that's not a real easy concept. So what I'm going to do is I am going to create a formula that is going to calculate what percentage of each one of these expenses, internet all the way down to Bailey, what percentage of each one of our expenses did we spend compared to our total income. So that's just going to be an equal sign, and we're going to take N8, which is our first expense, which happens to be the internet, and we're going to divide that by our total income. Now, with this total income, when I hit the enter key, the first thing it does is it gives me a decimal. No worries. We're just going to come up here underneath the numbers group. We're going to click on percentage. It gives me a percentage. If you want to show decimals, I can just come up here underneath the numbers group again, and I can increase or decrease those decimals. I want it to be a little bit of a truer percentage, so I am going to increase those decimals. If I didn't do that, Excel will simply round up or down that percentage. So before I fill this down, let's take a look at my formula again. We are calculating the percentage for each one of our expenses that we spent out of our total income for the year. So when I fill this down, I need to create an absolute reference out of N5. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and use my shortcut. I'm going to hit the F4 key. We only need to lock in row 5. Sometimes just to be safe, I lock in the column and the row. It's not going to hurt anything if you lock both of them. you're still going to come up with the same results. So now that I've got that locked, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill that down. And don't need that one. Oh, yes, I do. So it filled it down automatically, and you can see the percentage of each one of our expenses. So in other words, we spent 2% of our yearly income on the internet. We spent about 2.5% of our yearly income on OPPD. You can see that our largest is our mortgage. Almost 26% of the total income went to that, and so on. All right. So now let's look at creating some charts. And what I want to do is I want to chart my labels for expenses and my percentages for each one of those. Now, the problem is that when I select my expenses and then I come over here to the percentages, it deselects my expenses. If I pull across, it's going to select everything. Little trick here, if you hold down the control key, so I selected all of my expenses. Now I'm going to hold down the control key and I'm going to select my percentages. And when I do so, it allows me to select non-adjacent items. So I'm just holding down the control key and it will allow me to select non-adjacent items. That's not only true in Excel, it's true in PowerPoint, Word, and most of the Microsoft Office applications or the suite. So now that I have that selected, I'm going to move from the Home ribbon over here to the Insert ribbon. Underneath the Insert ribbon, I have a grouping called Charts. And you can see that we have all kinds of different options here. You've got column charts, you've got line charts and area charts, you've got pie charts. You have hierarchy charts and so on. What I typically do is I let Excel do a lot of the work for me. I click on recommended charts. And when I click on that, it populates this window and it says, okay, from the data that you have selected, Julie, these are the charts that we feel would be the best. So let's just go ahead and we will select the clustered bar. Again, if you don't like the recommendations, you can move from the tab Recommended Charts over here to All Charts. Select any chart that you'd like to. But I typically stick with what Excel seems to think is best. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on this clustered bar. I'm going to come down here and click on OK. Now, when I do that, it places the chart on top of my data, and I don't like that. So you can see that I now have two more ribbons up here because I've inserted a chart and I have the chart selected. So I'm just going to, from my chart design ribbon, I'm going to click on Move Chart. It populates this window. I'm going to go ahead and click on New Sheet. We could keep it Chart 1. That's just fine. I'm going to click on OK, and I now have Chart 1 just on the other side of my charts. I'm going to move that over. So here's my charts, and from the charting, you can play around with all kinds of different things. You've got chart styles. You can add elements to the chart. So if I go over here to data labels, because I kind of want some data labels, and we'll just put those percentages maybe inside the base. So now I have my percentages as well. So that's a little bit about charting. If you want to change the chart, you can come over here to change chart type, and you can very easily change the chart type if you'd like to. So let's say we want to go to a pie chart. We decide that we prefer that. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. It automatically changes that pie chart. Note that because I had added the data labels prior to changing the chart type, that it kept those data labels in there. Now, the other thing that's really nice about Excel is that, say if I go back to my charts and I make a dramatic change in one of my expenses. So what I'm going to do is, let's say that our mortgage changed. Let's just say that instead of 1564, it's 564. So when I make that change, note that we were almost at 25.5% over here. I'm going to go ahead and fill this in. Now I'm at under 1%. When I go back over to my charts, you can see that it automatically adjusted the chart. If you're one to use PowerPoint, I'm just going to mention this. I'm not going to go ahead and demonstrate it right now, but if you're one to use PowerPoint, you can copy and paste these charts into PowerPoint. If there is, if your data is changed in your original document, it will also change in your chart, and it will update in PowerPoint as well. Very nice feature of Microsoft Office. So that's just a little bit about charting. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and it wasn't on my agenda, but I think it's worthwhile to take the time to look at, is that if I increase my percentage, or if I zoom in a little bit more, you can see that now I can't see my first column. So I have to scroll back and forth. If I go over here to my percentage, I lose that. There's a way to fix that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go over to view, and underneath the Windows group, there's something called freeze panes, and you have three options here. You could freeze the top row, you could freeze the first column, or you can determine what rows and columns to freeze. So let's start with the first column. When I click on freeze first column, watch the line in between columns A and B. The line's going to become just a little bit darker, indicating that I have that frozen. So now when I scroll over, column A remains static so I can see it. If I come back up and I change that, let's say that I freeze the top row, then column A is going to unfreeze and it will freeze the top rows. Now you can see that dark line is in between rows 1 and 2. If I scroll down, row 1 stays. But let's say, for instance, that I want column A and row 1 to be frozen, or even more so, let's say the first 5 rows to be frozen. Then the key to that is utilizing, I need to unfreeze these first, utilizing this freeze panes. And what it wants me to do is it wants me to set the rows and the columns that I want to freeze by selecting the cell below the rows and to the right of the column that I want frozen. So in this case, I'm going to select B6. And in B6, I'm going to come back up to freeze panes. I'm going to click on freeze panes. Now, when I scroll down, those first 5 rows are frozen. And when I scroll across, column A is frozen. And again, you can change that. If I click in B2, unfreeze the panes, freeze the panes again. Now I just have row 1 and column A. So that's a nice little trick to know about if you have large worksheets that you're looking at, so that you can still see your labels that are critical to you. All right, so that's a little bit more about absolute referencing, freezing the panes, and charting. So let's come over here to the lookup table. And the first thing that I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the cosmetics of this particular worksheet. So when you go to print worksheets, sometimes they're very large and they go to multiple pages. And most of the time, for me anyway, the reason for that is because my labels are so long. Now, quiz 1 through 5 is that there doesn't have a lot of characters, but I'm going to use this as my example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select C3 all the way over to G3, and I want to look at some information underneath the alignment group. Underneath the alignment group, it allows me to maybe angle counterclockwise or to rotate the text up. So when I rotate the text up, that allows me to reduce the size of this column width if I want to, which will help when you're printing as well. So I'm just going to come over here to Format, and I'm going to tell it to auto fit the column width. Oops, I guess we need to pull out just a tad bit. Let's go ahead and select all of those. There we go. So now you can see that my column width has been decreased substantially. So it allowed me some additional room for printing. So that is simply looking at the angle of your labels. One more thing that I wanted to mention is that when I increase my row height, you can see that the quiz 1 through 5 stayed right at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and highlight those again. Right next to the angling, you have the option to align to the bottom, to align to the center, or align to the top. So if I click on the top, middle, or bottom, it will manipulate that. So let's see, I'm just going to put it in the middle. Okay. You can fill this in, you can change the color of it, and so on. So I do have student here, and let's say that I want to center student over A and B. Again, underneath the alignment group, if I select A5 and B5, I can tell Excel to merge and center just those two fields. So now I have the label student over my last name and my first name. Okay, let's move on to our lookup table. So the first thing I need to do is I need to create I'm going to use a built-in function to calculate the average of each one of my students. And to do that, I'm going to type in start typing average. I'm going to go ahead and grab this built-in function. I'm going to tell Excel that I want it to average from C7 to G7. I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key, and you can see that it automatically gives me my average for my first student. I can now use my fill handle and fill that down so that I have all of my averages for my 10 students. Now, I want to determine their grades, but I want Excel to do that for me. So in order to do that, we're going to use something called a lookup table. And you have lookup tables, you have H lookup tables, which is horizontal, you have V lookup tables, which is vertical lookup tables. And I just want to give you a little taste of a lookup table and what you can do with that. So I'm going to type in the equal sign, and then I'm going to begin to type in lookup, and you can see that here are all of my options for lookup. You have here's the H lookup, the V lookup, your X lookup. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just select lookup, and you can see that when I do that, because it's a built-in function, it tells me what the function is expecting me to do next. So what I need to do is I need to tell the lookup function to refer to cell H7. So that's the first thing that the formula needs to do in order to determine what grade each one of my students should be assigned. So I'm going to hit equal lookup, open parentheses, H7, and then a comma. And then I have something over here called grading scale. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you can see that I created just a real quick and easy grading scale. So anything between 0 and 59 receives an F, 60 to 69 is a D, 70 to 79 is a C, and so on. So with this, I need to select this information. So when I select from A2 down to B6, you could see that my formula is building itself. So we started with the equal lookup, open parentheses, H7, which is where my average is located for my first student, comma, and then I clicked on grading scale, and Excel automatically put that name in there. I selected from A2 down to B6. Because I am going to fill this down, I need to create an absolute reference out of that range. So again, I'm going to hit my F4 key, and it automatically puts in those dollar signs for me. Yes, of course, you can manually put those in. And just to let you know, every PC is a little bit different. So if the F4 key isn't working for you, sometimes you have to hold down the Alt in the F4 or the Control in the F4. You may have to play around with it a little bit, but I guarantee you that there is a keyboard shortcut on your PC to insert that absolute reference. Okay, so now when I hit the Enter key on my keyboard, it comes back to my lookup table. It assigns my first student, Jill, a B, which is correct. I always like to go in and play around with this a little bit. Let's say that rather than 100, Jill got a 77 on that second quiz. So when I hit the Enter key, it reduces her average to 75.4 and reassigns her a grade of a C. So now when I double click, it automatically fills those grades all the way down. So with this grading scale, you can put in the pluses and the minuses. You can do 60 to 63 or 60 to 62 is a D minus, and 63 to 66 is a D, and so on. You would just have to insert additional rows in here to handle that. So that's a little about a lookup table. Let me go ahead and go over here to sort and filter. So underneath sort and filter, I have a lot of data here that we're going to use. And the first thing that I want to talk about is sorting. So right now I have all of my salespeople, and I'm not sure what they're sorted by, to be honest with you. So let's go ahead and select column A. And then I'm going to come over here underneath the editing group, and I'm going to click on the down arrow. If I sort from A to Z, what it's going to do is it says, okay, wait a second. If you just sort column A, it's not going to sort columns B, C, and D that are associated with a salesperson in column A. So we want it to expand the selection. Almost 100% of the time, you want it to, in my case anyway, I want it to expand the selection. So I'm going to go ahead and click on sort, and you can see that it put all of my folks in alphabetical order. So, and you can do, you can do the same for month, sort and filter, A to Z, expand the selection, and now I have my months in alphabetical order. So let's come back over and let's look at maybe a custom sort. So on your custom sort, you have the option of sorting by and what you want to sort by. So maybe we want to sort by salesperson, and the cell values, we're going to have them from A to Z. I'll go ahead and click on OK, and it adjusted my salespeople back into alphabetical order. If I come back over, let's look at a custom sort again. Yes, I want it to expand the selection. So now I have my entire table selected. So I can add different levels. So maybe I want the salesperson to be in order from A to Z. Then I can add another level. And I want the region to be from Z to A. So when I click on OK, you can see that it gives me it defaulted to the salesperson and the A to Z. So going over, let's go ahead and look at filtering. So when I click on filtering, I had column A selected. So it just turned on a filter for column A. And I know that there's a filter on this because it inserted this little drop down handlebar right here. And when I click on that, it allows me to select just certain people or to filter other people out. So let's say that I just want to focus on Kathy and Michael. When I click on OK, it did not delete all of my other people. It simply is allowing me to just look at these two people. When I come back over, I can click select all again and OK, and it will bring all of them back. Now, if I want to apply a filter to all 4 columns, I can select all 4 columns, come back over here to the editing group and tell it that I want to turn on the filter. So let me turn it on, and now I have filters on all 4 of these. So if I want to, I can go back and let's focus on Richard, Tia, and Melissa. So when I click on OK, it gives me those 3 salespeople. Now, let's say that I want to narrow this down a little bit more. So I'm going to come over here to month, and I just want to see January for these 3 people. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. So I filtered out the salespeople in column A, and then I went over to month, and I told Excel that I only wanted to see January. So that's the way that you can utilize a filter on more than 1 column. I just brought back everybody, so you can see that all of my salespeople are here, but it's only showing January. So if I come back over and click on Select All, I can go ahead and click on OK, and it brings back everyone. So let's come over to order amount. And again, maybe I want to do a numbers filter. So I can tell it that I want to look at everybody that is greater than 100. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Oops. Is greater than 100 and clicked on OK too fast, and is less than 1,000. So when I click on OK, it gives me only those months that are between 100 and 1,000. So you can play around with these filters. You can filter just by the options that are in your cells, or you can filter, do a custom filter as well. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn that custom filter off. So I'm going to go ahead and select all, click on OK. Now let's go back and look at filter. Look at my top 10. So when I go to filter numbers and I want my top 10, I want the top 10 items or percentages. We're just going to select items. When I click on OK, it gives me my top 10 orders. All right, so that's a little bit about sorting and filtering. To turn those back off, I can select those 4, come back up to sort and filter, and click on filter again, and it takes the filter off. Now there's 2 ways that you can utilize the sort and the filter. There's 2 ways to get to it. You can go to the editing group on the home ribbon, or you can go to data, and it has a sort and filter on this ribbon as well. So it kind of depends on what you're doing, what you're working on. If you want to select it from the home ribbon, you can. If you want to go to the data ribbon, you can as well. So it works the same way. All right, so that's just looking at a little bit about sorting and filtering. Let's look at text to columns. So underneath text to columns, you can see that currently I have all of my salespeople in column A, and their last name is separated by a comma. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my data ribbon again. Underneath data tools, you have something called text to columns. Now, in order to utilize this, the first thing that I want to do so that I don't lose my data in column B is I want to select column B. I'm just going to right click, insert, and I'm going to insert another column so that I have a place to put the first name of the salesperson. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to select column A. I'm going to go underneath my data tools and click on text to columns. Now I have 2 different options here, and we'll look at both options. I can I can convert text to columns by delimited, which means by a character, or I can select a fixed width. So let's look at delimited first. When I click on next, it says, okay, what's separating the two items that you want to separate out into another column? In this case, we have a comma, not a tab. We have a comma. If you did have some other character, you could come down here and click on other and type that in. So maybe it's a closed parenthesis sign, whatever the case may be. But you can use this with any character that you'd like to. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come back to comma. Note that when I do that, it gives me a data preview down below. So if I take that out, we see column A just as we have been viewing it. If I put my check mark back in that box, it separates them out. So we're looking good. I'm going to go ahead and click on next, and then I'm going to click on finish, and it says, okay, there's already data here. Do you want to replace it? And that's why I inserted that column before I started this process. We really don't have anything there. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK, and boom, it moved the first name over to column B. All right, so let's go ahead and let's look at the months. So for whatever reason, let's say that we want to separate the labels January, February, and March. So let's say that I want to abbreviate those. That would work. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select column E. I don't need to insert another column because column F is already blank. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to click on text to columns. And this time I'm going to go to fixed width. And when I click on next, it says, okay, where do you want to separate these out? And I'm just going to take my mouse and I'm going to click in between the N and the U in January, and it places a line there. So it places that line there, telling me that that's where it's going to separate or create another column for, in this case, the UARY of January or the CH of March. And the BRUARY for February. So when I click on next, it says, okay, this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and say, that's fine. Go ahead and finish. And you can see that it separates all of that out for me. So if for some reason you want to separate information into another column, you can do so very easily by using text to columns underneath the data tools on the data ribbon. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to delete that because we don't need it. Fix back up month here. And that's a little bit about text to columns. Okay, let's move over to pivot tables. Now, when you're looking at pivot tables, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to my sort, and I'm just going to have it sort this from A to Z. Again, expand that selection, and we have it expanded. So let's say that I am looking at the data for my salespeople for Q1 and the different regions, but I want subtotals for each one of my people. So what I used to do, and I'm telling you the truth here, what I used to do would be I would click on row 6, I would right click and insert, and then I would put in a subtotal. And I would create my formula for each one of those people. So I'd get my sum, and then I'd move down to my next salesperson. Insert another row, subtotal, auto sum, and enter. And I would do that for each one of these people. Now, we don't have a lot of data right here. However, you don't need to do that because let's say that after you had a subtotal for each one of your salespeople, then you wanted to do a subtotal for January, February, and March. Well, then you would have to look at the data in a different view and create formulas for that. We don't need to do that, folks. So let me go ahead and just undo this. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I am going to select this table. Technically, I don't have to select the whole thing, but I like to just to play it safe. I can click inside and I can do a Control A at this point, and it will select the entire table. Or if I click inside of the table and I do a Control and a star, it will select the entire table, as opposed to clicking in A1 and going all the way down to row 40. It's just a little bit faster to use those keyboard shortcuts. So once I have that selected, I'm going to move over here to my insert ribbon. And on my insert ribbon, my first grouping is called tables. And I have something called pivot tables. I have recommended tables, and I have a table. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on a pivot table. And when I do that, it populates this window and it says, okay, here's the data that we have selected. Note that it automatically put it in an absolute reference. So we have from A1 down to D40. And I would like to put my pivot table on a new worksheet. You can put it on an existing worksheet if you want to, but we want to insert a new worksheet. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And when I do that, you can see that I now have a sheet 4. And it's a little empty right now. So let's take a look at what we can do with this pivot table. You'll note that now I have two new ribbons again, Pivot Table Analyze and Design. And over here on the right-hand side, I have Salesperson, Region, Order, and Month. If I go back to my pivot table, I had 4 different fields: Salesperson, Region, Order Amount, and Month. No coincidence that that is what's showing over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell my pivot table that I want to see all of my salespeople. So when I clicked on my salespeople, it automatically brought in each one of my sales people from the other worksheet. Now, if I click on order amount, boom, look what happens. It automatically gives me the sum of their order for Q1. I didn't have to go in and create a subtotal for each one of these people because my pivot table does it for me. My pivot table does all of that for me. Again, remember we were talking about sorting and filtering. If I want to, I can tell it to sort from A to Z, or I can tell it to sort from Z to A. I can tell it that I only want to look at Chris and Melissa. Click on OK, and it filters those out. So your pivot table has those options as well. Let's say that, let's go back over here and talk for a little bit about what happened over here. When I selected salesperson and order amount, the pivot table or Excel automatically said, okay, we think that this would be best to be in rows. If you don't want it to be in rows, you could put it in columns and go across. It just depends on how you want it displayed. You can certainly move this information around if you want to. I like my salespeople to be in the rows, but like I said, you can automatically change that. When I went to order amount, I went ahead and selected that, and it put that underneath values. If you want to manually move the fields down, I can hover my mouse over order amount and I can drag and drop it down here. It's just a couple of different ways. Or let's say that I want it to be in columns across. I'm not sure why I would want it that way, but you can do that if you want. So remember when I said that, what if I want to know the regions in the order amount? What I need to do is simply click on region and order amount, and it gives me that data automatically. If I want to see just the months, I can see by month and the order amount. Now remember when we were working on charts and I went in and I drastically changed the mortgage and showed you how it changed the percentage on our chart, the pivot table works a little bit different. So if I come back over to my pivot tables, let's say that we're going to make a drastic change. Kathy Albertson didn't have $350 in sales in March, she had 35,000. So when I come back over here to my pivot table, you can see that my sales didn't change. And even if I come up here and I put in salesperson, whoops, I don't want month, I want order amount. It's still, where's Kathy? It's still giving Kathy simply $2,650. So there's one more step that you need to take when you update data in the on your worksheet. So what I need to do is come back over here and click on refresh. And now that I refreshed, you can see that Kathy's sales increased and the grand total increased to 58,215. So looking at your pivot table, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put back in maybe the regions and in the order amount. And I don't want my salespeople in there. So here's just my regions. If I go into tools and I can create a pivot chart. So when I create my pivot chart, it gives me all of the different options. We're just going to stick with the column chart. That looks just fine. You're going to go through the same process that you did with inserting the chart for our percentages. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Again, I don't really want this chart right here. So I'm going to go to design and I'm going to click on move chart. We're going to have that chart on its own worksheet. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK, and it gives me this information. Now, again, I can go in and I can change the chart style if I'd like to. And that's something that you can play around with, because that's a whole nother webinar within itself, looking at charts and all of the options that you have. So I have my chart, and if I go back to my pivot table data, let's say that I change this back and just put a 0 in. So now if I go to sheet 4, which has my information, you can see that I'm still at that 58,000, and I just deleted $38,500 of sales, but it's still showing here. If I go to my chart, it's still showing here. Same rule applies. I need to go to, where are you? Where'd you go? Oh, there you go. I was on it. Pivot chart analyze and click on refresh, or you can see that the keyboard shortcut is Alt F5. When I hit that, it automatically updates my chart and it will update my pivot table information. So you need to make sure that you're refreshing that information when you look at your pivot tables. Okay, let me go back over. And show you just a couple of other things underneath conditional formatting. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select column C. And underneath conditional formatting, I can have Excel highlight information that I want to stand out. So let's say that I want Excel to highlight cells that are less than $200. Oops, so $200, and you can see that it's live, that it's selecting everything that's less than $200. But maybe I don't want it with the red. I can go ahead and I can tell it that I want it to be yellow. I can tell it that I want it to be green. I can go into the custom format. Maybe I want the fill to be a blue for whatever reason. So I can go ahead and click on OK, and anything less than $200 is going to be highlighted in blue with a dark text, with a dark text. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Note that down below, it went ahead and applied that to all of my rows. So all of my rows were impacted. If you only want it, let me go ahead and undo that. Whoops. There we go, if we can use this. If you only want it to apply to particular cells, I can just highlight these cells and go back up to conditional formatting, highlight cells that are less than $200, custom format. I want it to be purple. And okay. And okay. So there we go. It looks like these are already sorted from smallest to largest. So let's go ahead and just put these people back in alphabetical order. And now you can see that it has all of those items underneath $200 highlighted in purple. If I go back to conditional formatting, highlight cells that are greater than, let's say that I want it to highlight cells that are greater than, whoops, hang on, cancel. I had the wrong data selected. Select those items again. Let's go back up here to conditional formatting, highlight cells that are greater than 1,000. So I can have it highlight all cells that are greater than 1,000. Let's go ahead and go with green and click on OK. And there those cells stand out a little bit more. All right, folks, we have about 5 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions, please let me know. You can put them in the chat or the Q&A. Oh, thanks, Candace. All right, well, folks, here is my email address. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. I'd be happy to help you out. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and stay healthy.